We got Jon Tarnoff here. Everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. We've still got people filing in, but that's okay. We'll do like the pleasantries to begin with while we're vamping for time here.
Sure.
This is the redefine and reclaim your value in mid-career, because you know what? You got a lot of value. I want to make sure you know that if you know nothing else from today, that you have a lot of value and you are being proactive just showing up here today. But you didn't come to hear me talk. You came to hear my guest, who is positioned above me here in this Zoom window. But his name is Jon Tarnoff. He's the founder of the Mid Career Lab, and that's following like a really storied career in entertainment. But I'll quit yakking. Jon, welcome to this webinar. Thank you for being here.
A pleasure to be an OpenWater founding member and on the call with you today. And hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Indeed. All right. So let's start with what the Mid Career Lab is. I mean, you can kind of guess from the name, but
Right.
what is the purpose of the Mid Career Lab?
So the Mid-Career Lab is a community that I set up this past year to open up the conversation to mid-career professionals, like most, if not everyone on this call, to talk about what we are experiencing in mid-career and the typical speed bumps, frustrations, surprises that typically go with hitting your 40s, definitely into your 50s, and beyond, as you attempt to maintain and sustain your career through these crazy times.
Okay. So I think what's important here is just I want to make sure that people, one of the things I think that can come out of this is this feeling of loneliness and alone, right? Because especially if you work from home. So, what are some of the stories you hear from people? Because that might help. Just let's just level set, right? Like, what do people
Right.
come to the Mid Career Lab saying they experience?
Right. Well, this is really an outgrowth of the work that I've been doing as a coach for the last 10, 12 years. And the typical surprise, the typical shock and awe that I get hit with right off the bat is I've never had this much trouble getting a job.
Yeah.
And something changes when you hit 50, maybe 45, depending on what business you're in. If you're in tech, it's even younger, as we know. So there's this great WTF going on. You're pursuing your career, you're at the top of your game, you have acquired all of this knowledge, domain expertise, insight, the wisdom of age is beginning to really percolate through. And all of a sudden, you're being told you're done. And I don't probably have to tell a lot of you, but there are all sorts of statistics about this. This never used to be such a topic on LinkedIn. And all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, it has blown up. Thank God, because it's a real problem. And we're starting to see some higher level thought leaders beginning to address this. Although corporate America continues to be clueless about this.
Okay. So, what's the first thing? I don't want to wallow, right? Like, we know there's an issue, we understand about the
Yeah.
ageism, right? So, as we are looking to redefine and reclaim, what's like the first thing you tell people who come to you?
Right. Well, I should probably kind of go into a little bit of backstory here around
Sure.
my own process, because a lot of this, obviously, we're all teaching what we need to learn ourselves. So my process has been figuring out my second act after working for 30 years in a very volatile business where, for whatever reason, I don't think I planned as well as a lot of other people who were perhaps on a more steady upward trajectory in their careers. I had a lot of ups and downs. The 90s were really challenging for me, if not interesting times. But I kind of came out of that with a sense of having to reinvent myself at age 50 after my startup tanked. I talk about this, just kind of cover this quickly in my bio here on OpenWater. And I went back to school. I went back to school to study spiritual psychology, which was a kind of a positive psychology branch focusing on basically Stoic philosophy approach to life and career. And I wasn't so much interested in becoming a psychologist or a coach or a counselor, although that's kind of what ended up happening. But I really wanted to learn more about myself. I wanted to learn more about how people interacted with one another and how I could learn to find a new opportunity and think differently about what was going on. I wound up fortuitously finding a way back into entertainment, but in a very, very different role. I pivoted from a focus on content and production into a people role and a people and strategy role for DreamWorks Animation, which I did through the 2000s until they changed direction. And I realized it was time for me to go out on my own and kind of put a lot of what I had been putting together for them to work for myself. And so that really is what led me into a consulting practice, which then eventually became the career coaching practice. And what I realized is that the practice that I had to go through for those 35 years in entertainment was beginning to map to the experience that all job seekers were having across all industries, namely that there's no more corporate loyalty, that you're in jobs for now the average is about 4 to 5 years, average job tenure. It's 2 to 3 years if you are a Gen Zer. So the world that we grew up in, where our parents told us, if you get that great job, you'll be able to stay with that company for most, if not all, of your career, and they will promote you and nurture you, and you will get to retire at 65 with a fat pension and sail off into the sunset, and life is good. And of course, we know that that is not true. So how do we adjust to this new environment where we are having to become more self-reliant at a time when the deck is stacked against us and we are going out there feeling like we're being cut off at the knees by the system that's out there, the broken job search and hiring system, and people are floundering with this. So back to your question about what people are coming to me with is, why am I submitting 50 resumes and not getting an answer? Why am I not getting in interviews? Why am I being ghosted? Why am I being gaslighted? And what do I do about this? How do I push back against this broken system that is no longer recognizing the value that I bring? Isn't experience worthwhile? Doesn't experience count for anything? And that's where we are.
Okay, so then where do you start? What do you say? So if people are coming to you with the same things, right? Like sent my resume out a ton of places, sprayed and prayed, as Phil Terry said. So what do you tell them? What's the first step in reclaiming and redefining your mid-career?
So there are two overarching principles that I think we need to start with in this process at this point in our lives. And I talk about this in my book. The first principle is the career you want is already inside you. This is a process of self-reflection. It is not a process of trying to fit yourself into what's out there in the world. The typical career counselor protocol is to say, okay, so write down all of your skills, all of your jobs. Now, search around for similar jobs that use those skills and apply to those jobs. Wrong. That's not going to work. You have to do a real deep dive into self-reflection about who you have become, what's different, and to synthesize all of the qualities of life experience and work experience that you have accumulated over this time as a way of understanding what your current value proposition is. So this is a self-reflective process that you have to go through before you even start aiming at a position or a title or a salary, because things have changed. And the second principle around this is that in order to create the future, you have to reconcile the past. We all have baggage. We've all been around the block a few times. We've made mistakes. We've stubbed our toe or worse a few times. And this has made us a little bit gun shy in many instances around being able to stand up for ourselves, feeling skittish about applying to a particular position or with a particular company, or answering a question in an interview, which may tap into our shame, quite frankly, around something that may seem trivial, but it really, for whatever reason, is immobilizing for us. So we have to reconcile all of the baggage that we have accumulated over this time. And this is where my Stoic approach and spiritual psychology comes in. We have to forgive ourselves, forgive the world for all of the injustices, for all of the mistakes that we've made, and really reframe everything as a lesson that has gotten us to this point in our lives and in our careers, and be able to walk into any situation and feel completely at ease with who we are, what we offer, and be able to take all of those slings and arrows and smile and glance them off us, because we are centered in both the who of who we are, that sense of having that career inside us, and the sense of having reconciled our past issues.
I don't want to dwell on that too much, but I do want to kind of dig into that, right? Because that's the kind of thing that you can hear people say, like, you need to forgive yourself, right? Like, you were talking about the Stoics, right? Like, there are things you can control and things you can't control, right? And some things are just way beyond, and this idea, but I feel like there's a leap between knowing what it is to say that and actually being able to do that, right? Like, how does one forgive themselves for that, right? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah. And, you know, let me just say this. Chris, how old are you?
52.
Okay. So you have a significant amount of life experience. You've seen life from different angles. You know, you have a
Yeah.
family,
Yes.
right? Raised kids,
Yes.
been married for how long?
Almost 20 years.
Right. So you have a tremendous amount of experience engaging in building relationships, resolving conflicts, getting to a new level, getting through issues which might have seemed in your 20s to be absolutely insurmountable. And now you go, oh yeah, remember that time we were at that restaurant and this thing happened, or this happened, and we were at the Thanksgiving dinner and this, and your uncle said that. We have tremendous amount of experience in dealing with these questions. And I just have to say, forgiving ourselves with the perspective that we have on life today is not too much of a stretch. And understanding and having empathy for the people who done us wrong and giving them their due for whatever it was that they were going through, the stresses that that toxic manager may have been under, the fact that they may have been promoted too early to the wrong job and are now taking it out on everyone else, including us. We have the capacity to understand these things a lot better. And I think part of the venue that I use to get there, and that I encourage people to do, certainly in working with me and just in general, is to journal. Simple as that. Start a daily journal. Write a page. Doesn't have to be a big deal, 10 or 15 minutes. What's coming up for you today? Do you have intentions around what you're going to do? Do you have a memory that's gnawing at you? You had a dream about something that you hadn't thought about in years? Write it down. Start talking about it. Give yourself a little self-therapy. Build a relationship with your unconscious mind through a daily practice of mindfulness, through the journal, that gives you the opportunity to come to a certain sense of equanimity about who you are, how the world works, what's going on out there. Again, back to the Stoic approach, and be able to say, what am I doing here? Why am I holding on to this? I've been through so much. Why am I afraid of reaching out to this person or claiming a certain skill set or an interest in a particular area? Why am I afraid of taking a risk? Because the truth is, at this age, we are far more capable of understanding risks, managing risks, and taking risks that are going to be successful. And just on a pure data level, the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City does a survey every year on entrepreneurship. And every year they find the same thing. Older entrepreneurs are more successful than younger entrepreneurs. The whole myth of Silicon Valley and Mark Zuckerberg, young people are just smarter, it's complete bullshit.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
No, no,
Well,
no, fine.
because
Please interrupt me.
what I want to do is that's okay. That's a really good starting point, right? And then I want to move into you were saying. I think a lot of people can relate to the fact that you want to take control of the things you can take control of, right? In a very stoic sort of sensibility.
Absolutely.
So you do start going through LinkedIn and other job boards and figuring out like, okay, what can I do? I'll tailor my resume to this particular thing. Boom, boom, boom. Right. And then you're saying that's the wrong thing to do. So how do you get out of the mindset of like, this is the one thing I can control versus this is where the opportunity actually is?
Yeah. It's all about taking control. And I believe that the way you take control is through establishing your superpower. It's the first of the 3 elements that I teach in my curriculum. Your superpower is your combination of experience, skills, abilities, talents, preferences, values, and everything that makes you you as a professional. And really defining all of that and then articulating that in a way that is value driven. So your goal is to come up with a value proposition based on your superpower. And your value proposition is not what you do, it's what you deliver. One of the big mistakes I think we make on our resumes and in our profiles is to talk about roles and responsibilities. I led a team of 20 people in charge of developing campaigns across global markets. What'd you deliver? What was the result of that? You need to demonstrate at this point in your life and your career that you're someone who delivers results. Because if they want people who are doing roles and responsibilities, they can hire people who are younger and cheaper than you. You have to step up to really connect the dots that are going to get you noticed and then hired around what you can deliver. So that I think is a really key differentiator in how we describe ourselves. The other thing that I talk about in the profile relates to the about section. And this is very much of a key point for me in the work that I do and what I see on LinkedIn and how I work with my clients. Most people, in my view, get the about section wrong.
On LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn.
Yeah.
They treat this as a bio, as a list of skills. I see it all over the place. They're bulleting things that they've done. For me, the about section is a mission statement. It is a first person, open, authentic statement of who you are, why you do what you do, and where you're taking your career. So it's a way of starting a conversation and building rapport with people who are aligned with your viewpoint, your experience, where you might fit into their world. And it sets up the second element in the program, in the curriculum, which is to build a community from your network. Your network, all of those people on LinkedIn, and hopefully everyone that you have a professional relationship with is on your LinkedIn. That network will stand by and watch you fail. But a community of shared interests, a subset of that community, people you've worked with closely, people who are aligned with your point of view, people who get you, people who are willing to go to bat for you. That is your community of shared interest. That community will step in and help you succeed. So you want to use the articulation and the career narrative that you're putting together on your profile, in your headline, in your about section, and also in many ways in your experience section, which, by the way, is your master resume. You don't have a separate resume from your experience section. It's one holistic document. That becomes your bridge to creating relationships with your community, and those relationships are going to mushroom out, or it's the pebble in the pond. You're going to wave. Those waves are going to go out and reverberate and start coming back to you with referrals, opportunities that are all aligned with who you are. So you're never having to fit yourself in to some job description. You're never playing whack-a-mole around, well, I could do this, I could do that. I've got this experience, I've got that experience. Don't be a generalist. Find your specific value. It can encompass a lot, right? It doesn't have to be one single solution, but it has to thematically hold together as a single deliverable or set of deliverables that are your signature identity as a professional at this point in your life. And what you're doing is looking for ways to deliver that. And you're going to be rejecting a lot of opportunities that aren't right. And you're not going to be found by a lot of people who are looking for generalists or looking for one aspect of what you do, or who misinterpret your profile because it's not fully explicit about what you want to do. So there's going to be a lot of static and a lot of noise. This process eliminates the static and the noise, gets you on the right channel, and then starts to bring the opportunities to you.
Okay, I want to come back to the community part in just a second, but what I want to do is just sort of recap, right? So step one, forgive yourself. Step two, sort of figure out what your superpower is, what your...
Let's not say forgive yourself. Let's say come present.
Come present. Right? Okay, sure.
Right. Stop telling the war stories. As you were saying before, stop complaining, stop, ruining the day that, ageist millennials and Gen Zs are marginalizing you in the workforce. Just get over it.
Get over it. And then develop, hone what it is you do that you can offer. Don't be a generalist. This is your specific sort of superpower, which can encompass.
Right. What you deliver, not what you do.
Right. What you can deliver. Right. Okay. That's really good to reframe that. And then go back and reframe your resume and LinkedIn profile through that lens of what you can do rather than what you have done.
What you can deliver versus
what you can deliver. Right.
Right.
Sorry. So, a lot of D words.
Achievements and deliverables versus roles and responsibilities.
Okay. Right. Okay. Now, we talk about the community and you talk about sort of, one of the things you write about on your website is being able to convert your community into sort of a sales force for you almost. They're out there because they want to help. People want to help you.
Right.
People want to be a good friend. How do you do that?
By being clear about what you want and what you deliver. Part of the problem with our well-meaning friends who say, if I hear of something, I'll let you know, and they never do, is because they don't really know how to help you. They don't really know how to pitch you. And they look at your profile and your resume and they go, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess I know what they do. But there really is there's no clear connection there. And if you spend the time, and this is not a one and done process, this is iterative, right? You start on this, it feels awkward, you put up a profile, you get feedback. People are going to go, so let me unpack this. You're doing this, or is this what you're saying you're doing? And you go, no, it's not that. You go back, you do it again. Now it gets clearer. The clearer it gets, the more people are going to go, okay, now I get what you do. I've known you for 20 years and I really haven't understood that this is the value that you provide. This is great. I know 5 people I should call, who would love to meet you and learn more about this because they're in an area that's completely complementary to what you're offering. So it really it comes down to what is the clarity of that narrative? How can you make a connection with another person? And how can you get into a conversation with another person? That's really what I'm going for with all this. It's about setting up conversations on every level. The more you talk, the better you're going to be at pitching your pitch and understanding what it is that your value is. And connecting with other people is going to help you understand what's out in the marketplace and what they need and who they can lead you to. And pretty much as you go through this process, you're going to get better at it. It's going to become clear what you do. You're going to go back and revise your LinkedIn profile to fit all of the de facto research that you've done on this. And you're building, it's a flywheel. You're building this this system that's going to get you into the rooms where someone says, you know, and there's a third element I want to talk about, you know, research your background. I know what you're about. You know, you're referred by these people. We're on the same page. Let's talk about how you could really move the needle over here for us.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So
I will
what's
tell you, I will say, this is how I got the DreamWorks job. Interestingly enough, this is exactly what happened at DreamWorks. They didn't have a job open. And I was having dinner with a friend of mine who was working over there. And this is right after my startup tanked. And I'm going, oh man, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said, hey, would you ever think about coming over here? And I said, are you kidding? It would be a ideal job for me. What's open? And he said, well, we don't have anything open. I said, oh, great. He said, well, let me start introducing you to some people over there. And it took 6 months. I must have met a dozen or more executives over there. And I kept talking about areas where I was curious about their business. I had experience from being in tech and being in movies. The conversations took this trajectory, and they wound up creating a job for me because it became clear that there were areas that needed filling in their business plan. And I was the guy who had the experience. It happened to be in two areas, one in tech and one in movies, where it all came together as they were changing over from being a classic animation company to a digital animation company. And that became kind of a template for me in looking at the process of how do you get a job today through building relationships and through networking in a way that's intentional and contextual, and takes all of what you are and who you are as a professional and applies it into a situation through connection. Make sense?
Okay. Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. Like just again, just starting with the idea of what you can deliver, focusing everything through that lens, being able to talk about it like immediately, just like, oh yeah, these are my superpowers. This is what I do. And people then start thinking about like what they're not going to remember your like career milestones, right? But they will remember what you tell them is like your superpower.
Well, they may remember the career milestone if the career milestone informs what they need. So this goes to the question of experience. And the problem that we have with experience is that we assume everyone understands the value of our experience. They don't, particularly younger hiring managers who haven't lived as long as you have and haven't experienced as much as you have. And they kind of go, yeah, okay, I guess experience is valuable, but I need someone to solve this problem. Well, solve the problem. Don't give them chapter and verse about how you had a similar problem 20 years ago, and that's why you can solve it today. They don't really care about that. Probably it's not going to sound right if they think that you're using an old skill to solve a new problem. They're going to go, oh, well, that's not going to work. Well, guess what? It will. But couch it in today's terms. That's why before we were talking, you're talking about forgive yourself. It's like be present, be up to date, right? Take everything and apply it to right now.
Okay, so I want to open it up to questions here real quick, just so people know you can even start now. Just submit a question.
Yeah.
Below.
Let me hit the third. I want to hit the third.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I totally forgot. Yes.
There's a third element to this, which is the glue that brings the superpower and the community together. And that's the idea that as professionals at this stage in life and career, we have to be thought leaders. That the branding that we talk about really hinges on our ability to focus on 1, 2, 3 topics that are core to who we are, what we do, what we've built as our professional persona, and become seen as experts in that area, which means you have to engage, whether you are on LinkedIn, whether you're posting, whether you have a blog, whether you have a podcast, whether you're guesting on podcasts, whether you're part of a professional association, you're in OpenWater, you're doing events like this on OpenWater, you are engaging out in your community, your adjunct teaching, mentoring, whatever that might be, you have to use thought leadership as a tool to build that expertise and burnish your reputation as a subject matter expert.
that's one. I'm just going to do a little log rolling here. That's one of the reasons why we offer podcast interviews here on OpenWater. It's really for you, the member, so that you can take clips and say, look how smart I am. I just did an interview on corporate real estate or whatever. Right. So thank you for saying that, because I think a lot of people might think like, oh, I don't want to be on a podcast, or, oh, I've never done a podcast. Right. But the point is, what you're saying is, this is no, this is a tool for you to use. It's a very soft way for you to sort of get out there and express your thought leadership on something.
Absolutely. You need to stand up for what you stand for.
There you go. I want to open it up to questions. So please hit the Q&A button down at the bottom, submit a question, and I will pass it on to Mr. Tarnoff here. So I want to ask a question about LinkedIn real quick, because I feel like, how much time do you think people should spend on LinkedIn? Because it feels like it can be a place where it's just like, oh, it's just like a doom loop, right? Like
It is. Yeah.
It just becomes so heavy.
There's so much now. I mean, I think it really is. I'm feeling a little bit doomy on LinkedIn these days, and it kind of does pull you in. I think you want to quickly check in, see what's going on. You want to have a strategy around your LinkedIn usage. One strategy that I think is valuable from a networking and thought leadership perspective is to use it's a kind of a following strategy. But the idea is that you don't follow Brene Brown and her 50 million followers, because you're going to get lost in the shuffle. And it's nice to have that on your profile. It's like, oh, I follow Brene Brown. No one cares. She doesn't care. What you want to do is you want to follow someone who's got maybe 50,000 or 100,000 followers in your area. Maybe it's a articulate CEO, someone that you respect. Maybe it is a policy expert whose work is valuable in your area. And they have just enough followers to have some level of prominence, but not so many followers that you're going to get lost if you comment on a particular post. And of course, you want them to be posting fairly regularly, because the idea is not that you want to connect with them. The idea is that you want to connect with other followers who are in your sphere and who may be leads for you or contacts for you, and where you can kind of get off LinkedIn ultimately and into the real world of making deals, doing business. So that's one way of using LinkedIn.
Okay. Yeah, I just have noticed that like it can become this sort of place where I feel like I get a lot of people saying, I haven't been able to find a job forever, right? And my heart goes out to them, right? And it becomes, but you see that enough, and then you're going to start thinking like, well, then, like, how am I going to get something? Right. Or, if you look on the jobs and there's over 100 applicants already, you're like, well, why am I bothering?
Right. So the other thing about LinkedIn, and I've gotten in trouble a couple of times on this, I'm very proud of this, is over open to work badge, right? The little green open to work circle.
Yeah.
And all sorts of dialogue. You kind of, do a search on open to work, get all sorts of people pro and con. I'm con. I think it's a kind of a weak signal. But there's all this controversy about open to work, and no one is noticing me, and I'm not desperate. But I think for anyone who's considering using LinkedIn to get work, maybe there are actual jobs on LinkedIn. I don't think that's why you go on LinkedIn. And I don't think that you want to portray yourself as open to work, because guess what? Everybody on LinkedIn is open to work. It's why the platform exists. What you're looking to do is build relationships. And you don't build relationships by kind of sitting back and hoping someone contacts you, a recruiter contacts you. By the way, recruiters who love the open to work badge are lazy. They, instead of looking for people who have jobs, who don't want to broadcast to the world that they are looking for another job, they're just relying on the people who are low-hanging fruit and who are open to work, and that they can quickly bring in on a search for their employer or their client. So it's just a pet peeve of mine about the way that the platform works. You want to be portraying yourself as active, regardless of whether you have a job or don't have a job. Be a thought leader and engage on LinkedIn from your perspective as a thought leader. Post as a thought leader. Stick to your topics. Find people who are interested in what you are talking about. Doesn't have to be a large following, because it really is about quality, not quantity.
All right, that's good. Well, I think it's also one first. I want to remind everybody, if you have a question, this is being recorded and we're going to put it up on the web. So if you don't want to be on video, just submit your question in the Q&A button. If you do want to be, if you don't mind being on video, you can raise your hand and I can move you up to panelist. If you have a question, feel free to do it in either of those ways. I think the other thing that I want to kind of dovetail on what you just said, right? So it's sort of still having control over your work, even if you may not be in a job, right? And so what I'm wondering is, like, you know, it's almost like this, you're the CEO of your own company and you take on different kinds of projects. Oh, we just got a question. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you worked your way into your role at DreamWorks? I'm curious about how you described what you could do for them.
Right. So the conversations there really were kind of under the guise, ultimately, of, strange enough, informational interviews, which I think are a really important tool for all of us. And it started out as informational interviews. And I wanted to kind of dial back my hunger to get that job that didn't exist. And I thought, well, if there's no job, I'm going to find out about the company. I'm going to ask them questions. And fortunately, I found a number of people there who were interested in talking to me. We got into some great conversations about where the company was at that stage, what they were struggling with, what their opportunities were. And I just started making suggestions and making analogies and talking about my own background and asking more questions. And they would ask me questions about my startup. They would ask me questions about my prior Hollywood jobs. And these meetings, I won't call them interviews, but I guess they were interviews in a funny way, almost became working sessions. And we left those sessions kind of, both of us, whoever happened to be in the meeting and me, kind of nodding our heads going, interesting conversation. Well, let's stay in touch. And sure enough, a few weeks later, I would get a call from someone else at DreamWorks who said, you know, I was having a conversation with so-and-so you met with a couple weeks ago, and it sounded like a really interesting conversation. I'd like to meet with you. And that happened a number of times. And I kept kind of going up the food chain. And the funny thing about DreamWorks was that I had known Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the co-founder CEO, in my other Hollywood life. And I probably hadn't run into him in maybe 15 years. But the final interview was with Jeffrey. And I got that call. I was actually away on vacation, and I got the call. And it was his secretary saying, "Oh, I want to set up a meeting with you for Jeffrey for next week." And I said, "Oh yeah, okay, fine. I'm back. Great." And I walk in and he says to me, "So what the fuck have you been doing for the last 15 years?" And we had this kind of funny laugh conversation. I told him about the startup. I told him about the ups and downs in Hollywood, everyone. And he said, yeah. He said, "Let's cut to the chase." He said, "Here's what I think you can do for us." And he kind of laid out the next 6 months. And it was by no means a slam dunk. It was kind of, let's see if this works out. Let's see if it works out for us. Let's see if it works out for you. And here's some of the areas that I think you might be interested in trying to help us solve problems for, And, you know, it was 6 years.
That's great. We have another question here, which is someone needing advice on how to get out of the doing headspace and into the value message.
Okay. You know, I talked about this before. I would really encourage it. It sounds kind of simplistic, but journal. If you are not journaling, and if you can maybe put into the chat whether you have experimented with a journaling practice. And this is not diary. This is not high school diary where you kind of write down the things you did today. This is a deep dive every day into what's really going on inside you. And you can train yourself to access the deeper knowing parts of yourself and have a wide range of experiences in the journal around this question about getting out of that kind of doom loop of doing and thinking that the answer is outside yourself. The answer is not outside yourself, right? It's not, oh my goodness, someone's going to discover me. I'm going to, find the perfect. No, you have to, again, back to Katzenberg, this great line once. I started their college outreach recruiting program, and I used to take them out to schools. And some kid gets up at an art school and says, I'm kind of a shy person, and I feel as though my work should speak for myself. And I don't know, I feel uncomfortable about getting out there and kind of trying to get a job and submitting a resume or submitting a portfolio. And Jeffrey said, well, look, in a perfect world, yeah, your work should speak for you. He said, but in the real world, you have to speak for your work. And I think this goes to the dilemma that we have here today around figuring out how to represent ourselves properly. So I understand that you feel stuck in this state of doing and kind of going through these motions and thinking that by running on this hamster wheel, you're going to build traction. But if you don't have a foundation from which to build and to grow and to establish that rapport with the people who are looking for you to deliver value, it's not going to go anywhere.
We got someone saying that they write 3 pages a day, which is wonderful. Good for you. I want to ask you a question. A very tactical question.
Yeah.
Which is, we've mentioned portfolio, but like portfolio sites and email addresses, which may seem like very minutia type of things, but where do portfolio sites fall on sort of your ranking of things that you absolutely should have? And then
portfolio sites like,
so like if you have a place where so like outside of LinkedIn, right? It's like if you have writing work or art, or like case studies or something like that you can list.
Yes.
And then the other thing I want to run by you, which is on an even more minute level, which is sort of like, is it better to have your own domain as an email? So I could write chrisalbrechtcorp.com versus chrisalbrecht@gmail, which is not my email address. Don't write me at that. I don't know whose that is.
I don't think so. I don't think we need to make too much of email. I think if you have if you want to have a more seamless presence and you have a domain that you like and you want to associate your name and the email and you can set it up in a way technically that's not too much of a pain in the ass for you to run, yeah, sure, why not? But I don't think that, I think we're kind of beyond the glamour of, oh, I have a domain. It's now more about getting work done. And I think to the question of the portfolio site, whatever that might be, and this gets to thought leadership, you have a number of choices. For some people, depending on what your business is, it could be your Instagram. For other people, it could be a website. For other people, it could be a YouTube channel or a podcast that is audio only, which I would not kind of recommend as much anymore. But you have to calibrate it to what your message is and what your audience is and what your business is. So I think it's important not to be everywhere, because that is a time suck, and you've got to kind of worry about, am I paying enough attention to this channel or that channel? Really narrow it down to where you're going to be most effective, or you're going to reach the people you want to reach in the way that you want to reach them.
Excellent. And I just want to open it up again to people who may have questions. Feel free to either raise your hand if you want to be on video that is publicly available, or just submit a question. I'm going to ask this question, which is, what they teach you in journalism school, which is, what haven't we talked about that you want to make sure people know?
Yeah. Stop chasing job openings and start building relationships. Everyone says, oh, I need a job right now, or it's too late, or it's going to take me too long to do your system. Your system is kind of an idealized system. I don't have the time for that. Well, it's back to what's the best time to plant a tree. You got to start now. You have to really start to pivot around to a more sustainable system where you become the center of the universe as opposed to the employer becoming the center of your universe, because that employer really does not care about you. The recruiter may be helpful, but really doesn't care about you. You're not paying their fee, right? The employer is paying their fee. You have to make yourself the center of your universe. And it's back to the 4 Ikigai questions. What do you love to do? What do you do well? What does your world need? That's my tweak on the Ikigai question. They say, what does the world need? It's too big. What does your world need? What does your professional world need? And what can you get paid for? So it really covers the synthesis of what that persona is, that value proposition is. Focus on that every single day. Make sure you're working on that and balancing out whatever else you might be doing. If you need a job, if you're applying, if you're talking to recruiters, whatever that might be, go for it. Absolutely. I'm not saying don't use the conventional methods. I'm saying rebalance your mindset and your activity set around this idea of the superpower, the community, and the thought leadership.
Okay, before we go, I want to make sure people know that where to find you, like how can they engage with you and the Mid-Career Lab. Where should people go after listening to this? Where should they go right now? And you can submit it in the chat too if you want to put a link.
They should go to my LinkedIn profile. You can just search me. I'm the only Jon Tarnoff on LinkedIn for some reason. And you can go to my website, which is jontarnoff.com. And if you want to jump into the Mid-Career Lab, you can go to midcareerlab.com and read some of the newsletter posts and sign up, or just send me an email, either through chat here on OpenWater or jt@jontarnoff.com.
Everybody go find him on LinkedIn, the Mid-Career Lab. He's got links there. Jon, this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much. This is really solid, actionable advice.
I appreciate the journalistic, hard questions, man. Just keep them coming.
I don't think they were that hard. I think they're
hard. Just like you have that journalist energy.
It's what I do. That's what you know. What, Jon?
Great.
That's what I deliver.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I deliver.
Exactly right.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for attending.